There is a peculiar irony in the era we call modern. We've split the atom and mapped the genome. We've beamed images across the cosmos and traced gravitational waves rippling through space-time. And yet, despite these remarkable triumphs of intellect, we remain astonishingly clumsy when it comes to understanding ourselves and one another. We've achieved precision in physics, but falter in empathy. We've charted the chemical composition of distant stars, yet still struggle to nourish the dignity of every human life here on Earth. This paradox isn't just poetic, it's real. And it raises a profound question. What does it mean to be intelligent in a universe as vast, as ancient, and as intricate as ours? Perhaps, just perhaps, the next great revolution won't come from another technological breakthrough, but from a shift in how we perceive our place in the cosmic story. Not as masters of nature, but as participants in its unfolding. Some say the world is changing. Others argue it's unraveling. But nature, in its quiet continuity, doesn't traffic in dramate, undergoes transformation. What we may perceive as collapse could very well be a shedding, much like a planet cooling from its molten youth or a star nearing its next stage of evolution. You see, the history of the cosmos reminds us, nothing stays static. Stars are born. Galaxies collide. Planets form, decay, and reform. So it should not surprise us that civilizations, too, molt their assumptions, reconfigure their frameworks, and sometimes, if we are lucky, awaken to higher understanding. For generations, human society has been shaped by narratives written by a relatively small subset of our species. This is not a condemnation, merely an observation. Power tends to consolidate, and those who hold it often craft the language, the values, the borders of thought. But like all things built on limited perspectives, these frameworks strain under the weight of evolving knowledge. And knowledge, in this era, flows like photons through fiber optics, relentless and illuminating. The internet has become our species' mirror, exposing both brilliance and bias in equal measure. Information once locked behind institutional doors now pulses in the palms of billions. This is no small shift. It is in many ways our species' first global nervous system. But here's something we often forget about. Systems, whether mechanical, ecological, or societal, when pushed beyond their limits, they don't merely fail. They adapt, they oscillate, they recalibrate. Yet in the short term, this process can look like chaos. Old assumptions tremble, institutions react. And in their reaction, they often reach for what's familiar, fear. Fear, after all, has evolutionary roots. It sharpens our attention. It demands a response. But when wielded persistently in our public discourse, it becomes less of a survival mechanism and more of a tool loan that narrows our perception just when we need it to expand. Think of Galileo. He didn't just threaten the orthodoxy of his time, he expanded our place in the cosmos. Not because he wished to dismantle the old world, but because he was devoted to truth. And the truth, when revealed through observation and reason, can be unsettling, especially if your worldview depends on it staying hidden. Fast forward to today, and we find ourselves not unlike those early astronomers peering through new instruments, but our telescope now is digital. Our lens, global consciousness, and what it reveals is not an ending, but a transformational recalibration of what it means to be aware, to be connected, to be human on a pale blue dot hurtling through space. Einstein taught us that gravity is not merely a force-ate, is the curvature of space-time itself, bent by mass and energy. In that same spirit, consider this. What bends the trajectory of a civilization? What alters the curvature of collective thought? Perhaps it is the gravitational pull of billions of minds, simultaneously questioning, reflecting, evolving. Consciousness, while elusive in its scientific definition, behaves like a distributed network. And when enough nodes within that network shift their frequency through curiosity, through humility, through inquiry, the system itself begins to reconfigure. This isn't rebellion, it's resonance. Not against something, but toward something, toward coherence. And coherence is not an abstract. Ideal it is a principle observable in nature. Galaxies rotate with symmetry, atoms arrange into crystalline lattices, ecosystems find equilibrium through mutual interdependence. When humans act in resonance aligned, not in opinion, but in intention, the result is not chaos, but emergence. This is not mysticism, it's physics. It's the behavior of complex systems under the influence of adaptive pressure. And we, as a civilization, are approaching such a pressure point not because we are doomed, but because we are alive in a moment of extraordinary transition. Many speak today of awakening, but we must ask, awakening to what? To me, it is not an escape into abstraction, but a return to evidence, to the recognition that every atom in your body was forged in the crucibles of ancient stars, that your thoughts arise from a neural symphony shaped by millions of years of evolutionary refinement, that the breath you just took was part of a cycle older than language, shared with trees, oceans, and civilizations long vanished. Awakening, then, is not a rebellion against science, it is its fulfillment. It is the moment we realize that the study of the universe is also a study of ourselves, because we are not separate observers of this cosmos, we are its participants, its witnesses, its storytellers. But awareness comes with a price, discomfort. The human brain is a pattern-seeking organ, evolved to favor stability over ambiguity. Yet real scientists, born not from certainty, but from curiosity, from daring to ask the question that challenges the very foundation of what we thought we knew. And so the great transition unfolding today is not political or economic at its root, it is perceptual. It is a shift in how we relate to knowledge, to one another, and to the planet that sustains us. You see, every system, whether biological, ecological, or societal, has thresholds, points at which accumulated pressure triggers reorganization. In thermodynamics, it's called a phase transition. Water becomes vapor not at a random moment, but when a specific temperature is reached. Similarly, societies reorganize when enough minds begin to question old assumptions and entertain new possibilities. This doesn't require mass upheaval. It doesn't begin with noise. Often, it begins in silence and reflection. A teacher reimagines their classroom. A scientist re-examines their data. A parent chooses to listen rather than react. These aren't headlines. They're harmonic, subtle shifts that, when amplified across a population, form the basis of new structure. To those accustomed to the old systems, this feels like instability. But to a physicist, it is emergence. The moment when scattered fluctuations synchronize into coherent form, fireflies blinking in unison, metronomes aligning on a shared surface, human thoughts coalescing not by control, but by connection. This is not utopia, it's complexity science. And in this emergent complexity, every individual plays a role or not as a passive observer, but as a node in a dynamic, living web. Your attention matters, your questions matter, because they influence the system in ways we are only beginning to understand. When people ask, what difference can I make? The implication is that an individual is somehow separate from the system, but physics disagrees. Systems are shaped by their components. A single molecule in a cloud chamber changes the direction of particles. A single mutation alters the trajectory of evolution. In complexity science, this is known as sensitivity to initial conditions. You might know it by another name, the butterfly effect. So, what happens when enough minds distributed across the globe begin thinking not in terms of conquest, but coherence? Not how do I win, but how do I align with what's true? The answer lies not in revolution, but in recalibration. Not in overthrow, but in overflow. When more and more people adopt new baselines of thought, the older patterns no longer hold not because they are defeated, but because they are outgrown. Like Newtonian physics giving way to relativity not false, just incomplete. The most powerful force in the universe may not be gravity or electromagnetism, but clarity. Because clarity of thought, like light, reveals structure. And once something is seen clearly, it becomes nearly impossible to unsee. That is why systems built on distraction struggle in the age of distributed awareness. The more people awaken to context the historical, ecological, and cosmological story in which they participate, the more resilient their minds become to manipulation. Not because they rebel, but because they remember. Awareness, much like light, does not beg for permission to travel. Once emitted, it moves outward indifferent to boundaries, unbothered by resistance. That's the nature of truth discovered through reason. It does not demand belief. It simply exists, ready for any mind prepared to receive it. And once received, something fundamental shifts. Not in the fabric of space, but in the fabric of assumption. You can't look at the stars the same way once you know they are thermonuclear furnaces, older than history, sending photons across billions of years just to land on your retina. Likewise, you can't look at society the same way once you grasp the interconnected systems economic, biological, informational that shape our daily experience. This is not an invitation to cynicism. On the contrary, it's an invitation to awe, because to be aware is not merely to see flaws, but to marvel at complexity, to appreciate that the universe, in all its grandeur, entrusted part of itself to you, your brain, your breath, your questions. That's no small gesture. It implies participation. And participation implies responsibility, not imposed by ideology, but implied by scale. You, a product of 13.8 billion years of cosmic unfolding, are now part of a planetary network of sentient beings capable of asking not just how, but why. And that question, that hunger for meaning, is not a weakness. It's a signal, one that intelligence has reached the threshold of reflection. The more we learn about the universe, the more it humbles us. We once believed Earth was the center of all things. Then we discovered the sun, then the galaxy, then billions of galaxies. And with each revelation, the coordinates of our cosmic ego shifted outward. Yet the irony is this: the farther we drift from the center, the closer we come to truth. Not because we are insignificant, but because we are embedded in something vast, intricate, and astonishingly unified. The periodic table that builds your bones is the same chart that describes the stars. The DNA that codes your life is a recent echo of processes shaped by planetary evolution. So when we speak of progress, it's not about domination, it's about understanding. And understanding requires us to let go of control, to replace the question, how do we manage the Earth, with how do we align with it? Because Earth is not a machine we inherited. It is a living system of which we are a part. Its climate doesn't negotiate with poles. Its feedback loops don't yield to ideology. Like any complex system, it responds to inputs, energy, chemistry, behavior. And when those inputs shift dramatically, so too does the system. This is not punishment, it is physics. Just as your body runs a fever when out of balance, so too does the planet respond when strained beyond its tolerances. The awakening, then, is not merely spiritual, it is ecological, geological, planetary. To imagine ourselves as separate from nature is perhaps the greatest illusion our species has ever entertained. Every breath we take, every heartbeat, every synaptic spark in our brains is an expression of natural law chemistry, biology, physics, intertwining in real time. You are not in nature. You are nature in motion, in awareness, in reflection. So when we speak of awakening, let's not wrap it in mysticism or veil it in dogma. Let's speak of it as it is, a cognitive phase shift. A species beginning to ask deeper questions, not because of crisis, but because of maturity. Like an adolescent staring up at the stars for the first Timino to conquer them, but to comprehend their meaning. This moment in history, messy, noisy, uncertainties, not the breakdown of civilization. It is its adolescence. We are outgrowing old myths, discarding outdated metrics, and beginning to reimagine success, not as accumulation, but as alignment. Alignment with what? With reality, with ecology, with one another. And reality, when fully observed, is not cruel, it is elegant. Stars are born from collapse. Forests regenerate after fire. Complexity emerges not in spite of chaos, but because of it. So perhaps the disruptions we face today, social, environmental, existential are not signs of doom, but symptoms of emergence, the turbulence of a system reorganizing itself toward greater coherence. In physics, there's a principle known as entrainment. When oscillators, whether metronomes, fireflies, or even human heartbeats share proximity, they eventually begin to sync, not by design, not by command, but because systems seek coherence. Now consider this. What if human thought works the same way? When one mind dares to step out of the loop of fear-choosing reflection over reaction, it creates a kind of signal, a frequency, and frequencies resonate. One person thinking critically can influence 10 can shift 100, not by persuasion, but by presence. This is not idealism, it's observable. When teachers teach with wonder, students retain more. When leaders govern with humility, societies stabilize. When scientists speak with honesty, trust and evidence grows. These ripples of alignment are not revolutionary in appearance, but they are evolutionary in impact. So when people ask, what can one person do? The answer, through the lens of science, is more than you think. You don't need a platform. You are one. Every decision you make, what you value, what you consume, how you treat others feeds back into the network we call civilization. The laws of thermodynamics apply to you, yes, but so does the power of resonance. And when enough people emit clarity, the signal of confusion weakens not by suppression, but by saturation. Consider this. You are the product of 13.8 billion years of cosmic history. The hydrogen in your cells is ancient. The calcium in your bones was forged in the core of dying stars. The iron in your blood, yes, that Toas birthed in the final breath of a supernova. You are not separate from the universe. You are what the universe does when it evolves to the point of contemplating itself. And with that realization comes something extraordinary. Responsibility. Not in the punitive sense, but in the cosmic sense. Because if you are the universe aware of itself, then your actions, your thoughts, your values, they matter on a scale larger than yourself. The cosmos, indifferent though it may seem, has given you the rarest of gifts: awareness, consciousness, the ability to shape meaning from molecules. And the question becomes not just what will you do with it, but how will you treat it? Will you wield that awareness for self-preservation only, or will you use it to lift others, to protect the fragile balance of the biosphere? To bring elegance, not noise, to the signal of human civilization? Because in the vast expanse of space, intelligence is rare. Life, rarer still. And meaning, that's something we create, not alone, but together. Not in defiance of science, but in partnership with it. So perhaps the question was never, when will the world awaken? Perhaps the question has always been, when will you recognize that it already is? Because awakening isn't a moment marked on a calendar. It's a posture, a lens through which we view existence not as random, but as relational, not as chaotic, but as unfolding. You don't need to overthrow old systems. You need only to outgrow them, the same way a child outgrows their shoes knot in anger, but in movement. And when enough of us walk forward, not in fear, but in clarity, the direction of civilization changes, not through spectacle, but through physics. The universe does not ask for applause. It simply continues, expanding, creating, evolving, and now it has evolved into you. The next act? That's not up to the stars, that's up to you. What will you do, knowing that the atoms in your body were once inside a star, and that your awareness is the cosmos turned inward, asking itself, what else is possible?